This television is a portal to the past. Inside sit the dreams of one's youth and the fears of one's future. When imagination equates to a certain period of time and limits are left behind. The practical and the impossible cross over during those fleeting hours known as the Twilight-Tober Zone. For every beginning, an ending bides its time. Every journey eventually reaches its destination, expected or otherwise. Your exit on our eccentric interstate is fast approaching. But first, one more round of the twisted, eldritch, and bizarre. A particular cocktail only mixed in a dimension both corporeal and immaterial. The Twilight-Tober Zone. Year 5, our final flight in the orbit of this all-time classic program, begins with an episode featuring one of the biggest movie stars of the late 1930s and early 40s, Mickey Rooney. His face is recognizable to fans of Rod Serling's work as they combined efforts in several projects, including a live episode of Playhouse 90 and the feature film version of Requiem for a Heavyweight. But I think we all can agree, he's most famous for the 2000 Disney Channel original movie Phantom of the Megaplex.
There's always magic at the movies.
Long live Movie Mason. Mr. Grady,
G-R-A-D-Y,
is a jockey who's been ousted from the sport of horse racing due to several allegations of fixes and doping over the years. He lies alone in his home, mocking himself in the mirror for his mistakes, when suddenly, the mirror talks back. A cleaned-up apparition of Grady starts repeating his own insults back at him. The voice says it exists in the jockey's mind and continues to remind him of his past dishonest actions. Eventually, it gets Grady to admit his deepest desire, the one thing he wants above all.
I want to be big! Damn it, I want to be big!
Ridiculed for his height his entire life, Grady wishes to grow in stature. Sometime later, the jockey awakens to discover he's significantly taller, so much so that his room seems to have shrunk. Giddy due to his new dimensions, Grady calls an ex-girlfriend to brag, but becomes enraged when she rejects his advances. Soon enough, he receives a phone call that says he's about to get a ring from a lawyer at the Racing Commission. It's then that the voice, previously labeled as his conscience or alter ego, reveals its true identity and purpose. In Mark Scott Zickry's The Twilight Zone companion book, it stated that Mickey Rooney was supposedly set to direct an episode in the 5th season that never came to pass. This bit of info was actually part of a quote by the Zone's new producer at the time. Last Night of a Jockey was the 5th episode to air, but the 14th produced in this final round of installments. Thus, it was the first Zone made under new producer William Frug. Frug replaced Burt Granitt after the latter left for a more lucrative offer on a different CBS series. Serling was upset about Granitt's departure, but ended up getting along much better with Burt's good-natured successor. As stated in other reviews, at this point, Rod was burned out and didn't keep as close of an eye on his creation, leaving the new producer to cut down overlong scripts without additional input from Serling. Frug also creatively clashed a bit with cinematographer George T. Clemens. Tired from the show's schedule, Clemens didn't put up much of a fight in these conversations and was used a little less often in the remaining Season 5 productions. When Frug was brought in, 13 episodes were in development under Granitt, but Serling wanted the new producer to start with a fresh slate, so these ideas were abandoned. Zickry names some of these projects in his book. Quote, Richard Matheson's The Doll, about a lonely middle-aged bachelor who falls in love with a beautiful handmade doll, searches out the model and finds that she has fallen in love with a doll that looks like him. Charles Beaumont's Gentlemen Be Seated, about a future society in which laughter has been outlawed and a humor underground flourishes. Arch Oboler's What the Devil, about a couple of murderers who are chased along the highway by a dynamite truck driven by Satan. And 2 by Jerry Soule, Who Am I?, about a man who wakes up, looks in the bathroom mirror, and finds that his face has changed utterly, a fact that only he seems to recognize, and Pattern for Doomsday, in which a tremendous asteroid is on a collision course with Earth, and a computer selects 8 people, a bacteriologist, a psychologist, a philosopher, an auto mechanic, an artist, a singer, a con man, and a shady lady, to escape on the lone spaceship. Curiously, Frug himself wrote a script that was never produced. In Many, Many Monkeys, an epidemic breaks out that causes folds of flesh to cover people's eyes, unquote. FYI, Many, Many Monkeys was later made as an episode of the 80s Twilight Zone. With Rod Serling behind both stories, I've always thought The Last Night of a Jockey was similar to Season 2's Nervous Man in a $4 Room. There were also easy comparisons to Season 3's 4 O'Clock with this episode's emphasis on size, but the guy alone in his room talking to himself in a mirror thing we had directly seen before. Nervous Man is one of my personal favorite episodes and contains one of my favorite performances. Director Douglas Hayes made his mark with several visual and thematic choices. While not on the same level production-wise, Last Night of a Jockey is not a bad companion piece. Excluding Rod Serling, Mickey Rooney is the only actor on screen here in a dual performance that elevates the installment. There are definitely moments where it feels like he was hamming it up a bit or going over the top, but it seemed called for considering the state the character was in.
Where's the fun? See? Oh, careful. You don't want to go through the floor. Slap your face off.
Overall, it's a strong turn for the legendary actor. However, what's even better than the episode itself is Rooney's commentary track on the Blu-ray.
Hi, this is Mickey Rooney. You're watching the Twilight Zone.
Do you remember much about this episode?
No, I don't remember anything.
We're watching it together for the first time.
I don't care anything about it.
The interviewer was trying so hard to get something out of him, but hilariously, Rooney wouldn't budge.
Anytime anybody said anything about a short, you were the butt of jokes.
Well, I'm tired of that.
Oh, was this ever a fantasy of yours?
No. I have no fantasies.
Does any come back to you as you watch it?
No. It's too long ago. You're asking the impossible. I've done so many things since then.
What kind of preparation would you have
Nothing.
done for a part?
Just did it. There's no preparation for things like this. You just do them.
Would the director have given you...
No. Nothing. You just played the scenes.
This all gave me a huge laugh, and it's a highly entertaining listen if you can find it.
The younger audience doesn't want to see
that's
this.
That's who's watching this.
No, it isn't.
Yes,
They're watching sexy things.
Grady's doppelganger says he's actually the embodiment of man's last gasp, the strength dredged up in desperation. Instead of using him to gain respect in a noble way or get his life back on track, Grady used the voice to simply grow physically. Angrily defending his choice, the jockey admonishes his reflection before the telephone blares. The Racing Commission has granted his return to the sport. Ecstatic, he boasts about the news just as thunder and lightning invade his room. The voice laughs. Grady looks around to see that he's grown even bigger. His head now scrapes the ceiling as he realizes he's too big to ride. The jockey flies off the handle, destroying his room in a tearful tantrum, begging the voice to make him small again.
You are small, Mr. Grady. You see, every time you won an honest race, that's when you were a giant. But right now, they just don't come any smaller.
Rod's narration tells us Grady is 10 feet tall and completely misjudged the worth of a man by how big he looks in a mirror. One really fun aspect of this episode is the changing size of Grady's room. We're treated to 3 separate sets that Rooney's character inhabits. The first is, of course, a standard bedroom area where we're introduced to Grady and his mysterious reflection. The second is a replica that's smaller but would put Grady at about 7-ish feet tall. The bed, the phone, the sink, every detail is made to fit the scenario. The final set would be perfect for a 3-year-old, and watching Grady tear it up is strangely satisfying. Credit to the set decoration, art direction, and the rest of the crew for keeping everything consistent as this character's world shrunk around him. It may have been a touch gimmicky and similar concepts had been done better across the series, but Rooney's performance, the changing surroundings, and some appealing shots raised The Last Night of a Jockey into very watchable territory. It's not as solid as director Joseph M. Newman's previous episode, In Praise of Pip, but it's certainly an intriguing character study that most fans would get a kick out of. We're just getting started, folks. There's a ton more to get through this month as we slowly pace toward the exit of the Twilight Zone.